All right, let's bring on Mr. Lauglaug.
Woo!
Okay. There he is. Woohoo!
Going.
How's it going, dude? All right, dude. So let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us who you are, what you do? Just a small, few sentences introduction.
Yeah, I mean, the long and short of it is Derrick Lauglaug, Lauglaug, but it's pronounced Log. It's kind of hard for some people when they do it, so I just go by Derrick Lauglaug now with Log. So I got the .com set up, DerrickLauglaug.com. It's got all my links. I actually set up a new Instagram that's Derrick Lauglaug, spelled like that. Just started this year along with the website, kind of to promote the newest stuff coming out, the stuff that's just me, not my customs work, I guess you could say, because at this point there's kind of a separation between DLL Customs and Derrick Lauglaug. So
I'm going to change the spelling of my name. It's just going to be D-U-V. It's going to be Dove. That way people won't get it wrong. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like I've been doing this since 2013, 14, and it's come a pretty long way. I mean, I started out as one of the suck lord kind of guys, blister pack kind of guys. And then I went to my first show in 2015 at the Clutter for the In Action Figure show. And they were kind of like, what's your voice? We can see you can do our thing, but what, who are you as an artist, And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's a whole different story now. So I kind of took that and ran with it. And that was when I started the new kind of stuff that you see nowadays. That was the beginning of it.
Nice. So that was the first time I saw your stuff was I think the Sucklord gave me a few of your pieces, and so tell me about how that started, because you started taking the pieces out of his. You started making pieces basically out of his junk.
Yeah, chop suey.
Chop suey, yeah. So can you just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, when I got into it, it was the Space Necromancer set. This guy here, the Grimtail figure. When I got it, I opened it up and I was like, all right, I think I can do this. I know you're not supposed to open these things. They're not meant to be open, but as a artist myself with a, fine arts background degree or whatnot, I wanted to study it, the piece itself. And I had never really messed with resin before, casting resin. So I was like, all right, I think I can do this too. And so I went on eBay. When you first get into Sucklord or whatever, you get the surge. And I went on eBay looking for whatever I could find. I found the Chop Suey Series 1 box. And I was like, ooh, this looks like fun. And when I got it, I kind of interpreted it like, this is an artist putting out an art piece with all these random little objects in it, And so each object is meant to be interpreted as a little piece, like a work of art, almost like an Andy Warhol kind of thing, pop art. And when I took the actual bits that he had cast, I had noticed that he put pieces in the box that you could like piece together and make your own bootleg, kind of like a DIY kind of kit. There were little halves of resin of molds in there. So I just took them and kind of ran with it and put them together and started casting my own chop suey bits, and then those turned into chop suey figures, and I started giving those things away. And then I talked to you. You were like, people like editions and all that. And around that time, I got the pressure tank and made my first edition and ran with it. It was a chop suey figure made into a blister pack. So
nice. Yeah, I do find it hard to start collecting people's work who only make one-of-a-kind pieces. And I think that when you, there's the chop suey. Look at that. That's old school. And so, yeah, I do recommend people starting out creating an edition, because it's something you can promote over and over again, and multiple people can have it. And when it's a one-off one person can have it, and once they have it, it goes away, and you can't really justify promoting the one thing that you already sold. I don't know. I think for artists starting out making editions, there's some people who don't, and it still works. So not giving career advice to everybody out there, but I just feel like, generally speaking, Ian, can you hand me the other pieces right there? So were you doing resin already, or was that the first time you cast resin when you were doing those suckler pieces?
That was the first time I did it myself. I had seen other people do it back in art school, but I never really did it myself back in art school. It was funny, like 2006 or 7 when I first started. I had a instructor approach me, and because I was sculpting my own little kung fu kind of figures, and he was like, "I can teach you how to make molds of those and cast them." It's like sock mold kind of stuff. And I was like, what am I going to do with that? You know, I was all interested in ceramics and, you know, my music and the other stuff at the time. And yeah, I just kind of ran with all that and finished my art school out. And then afterwards, I was exposed to the actual, you know, resin community. I mean, I cast things and did mold making and stuff, but we did like metal pouring and plaster and wax and stuff like that.
Right. Well, I will say that I think the advice that you got from Clutter is good. It is what I tell artists all the time, is to try and have a voice. And, you know, what a voice means to me is that I can look at your work across the room and that I know it's yours. And that is certainly true for your work. And you have I don't know, there's a certain quality about your work that every other artist in the scene, there's not too many, there's a lot of like butting heads and like hatred and cattiness between the artists in the scene, but everyone I've ever met just loves Derrick Lauglaug. They see your pieces and they're just, you know, most artists are broke and they can't buy your pieces because they're too expensive, but they look at them at least and they're like, wow, holy shit, that's amazing. And there's a certain, and it's hard to get the sucklord's respect like right off the top. Like usually like it has to be earned over a period of time, and newcomers to the scene, he's usually like, who's that? But like even that dude, like he can't find anything bad to say about your work. Like it's just like, you know, you see him look at it and he's like, well, he's like, yeah, that's amazing. And you can see it's like, you know, it's like the alter ego in there just wanting to say something nasty, and then it comes out like butter. He's just like, oh, that's good.
I don't know. Sucklord's cool. Like, I think we get along pretty well. When I got into all this, I saw a lot of correlations between he and I. And when I first started meeting him and hanging out with him or whatnot, when I go up there, I could see some of those kind of things. And it was actually him and Tom at Sidekick that gave me that advice up at Clutter.
Right.
And even from the first time I met him, I mean, when I met him that time, I had owed him some money because I was giving him like $10 or $5 a figure or something for the chop suey things I was selling. And you know, cutting a little off the top for him. And so when I met him in person, I pulled out like a 20 or something and handed it to him, and he was like, oh, you know. He was like, oh, you're that guy, you know. So I try to rub the right impression on it, you know.
Sure. That's the easiest way into Morgan's heart, is just to pay him.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you got to understand what the Sucklord was like back then, and so you got to approach it like that and treat. I mean, I was a Galactic Jerkbag, like Galactic Jerkbag 66, like the OG jerkbag, you know.
Right.
I was signed up to the site before he had to revamp it and open it back up, and everybody had to sign back up again, like a week after he started posting it. So, you know, like I was pretty hardcore into that, and so when I met him, I knew how to give him, you know, like proper dubs.
You knew how to play that. You played him like a fiddle, is what you're saying. All right.
I
So
mean, it was more or less me paying respect because that's how I saw myself as giving respect. You know, I was
sure.
now doing this, and you know, replicating what he was doing or what the other guys were doing in the scene and his kind of work. And so, yeah,
Oh,
yes, it
so
is not throughout.
he wasn't threatened by you. So the other unique thing that you are able to do is while you are drawing still on pop culture and you're using pieces and parts of things that if you look carefully and if you know, you can tell what they are. But I would say to the average person on the street, when you show them this piece with all the detail, uh, you know, you kind of have to be in the know for you to realize that this is, you know, a Star Destroyer body. And you know, there's some Millennium Falcons in here, but you've totally taken the piece, these individual pieces out of context. Look, there it is. Is that the original mold?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's
So
the original sculpt.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
the Star Destroyer. It's a micro machine
Uh-huh.
kind of thing, little micro machine base.
Right.
Zelda keychain. It's like a little $5 bin of fairies, little plastic fairies,
Uh-huh.
with wings and stuff. It's a little heart charm I've had. I don't even know.
So do you have
Right.
boxes of parts?
Yeah, I have all sorts of random stuff.
And look
Millennium
at that.
Falcons.
So on your original sculpt there, and your original that you molded, like you
Mhm.
can kind of see the parts. But once you cast it in this, so tell us about this process, because this is semi-translucent, and then what are you doing to the mold to get all of this beautiful metallic kind of quality?
I mean, basically, this is just called dusting the mold.
Hmm.
That's a classic sculpture practice. I was doing that with my very first chop suey figure.
Hmm.
I dusted the mold with glow powder,
Right.
yellow and green.
And for anybody watching, these are in the store right now. I think, pretty sure, which one, did something sell already? I think these two sold already.
Nice.
But if anyone is interested, we have this piece and this piece right here. And you can see the backs. So it's interesting. Do you have all of your original pieces that
Not
you've
all of them. I've got a box full of stuff downstairs they're in shambles basically. Some of them are whole. Actually, I have that one.
I would encourage you to keep them all, because it's gonna, and you pull all of these out of a mold in one piece, correct?
Not all of them. Some of
This
them are
is
two
one.
piece. This is
This
one
is one.
piece. Yeah.
Is this one or two?
That is that's one.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a regular size pressure pot, or are you like using like some jumbo like?
No, I have
So the same size pressure pot that everyone else has that struggle with just to get things to pull out of a mold, and you pull magic out of
well the
that.
one it's a little bit taller, but it's thinner.
Say that again.
The one next to it is a little bit taller, but it's a little bit
Mhm.
thinner.
Got
But
it.
it's still a 2.5 gallon.
It's really fantastic. So let's talk about, every year you do this tribute piece. Can you talk about that? Why continue with this series and what it's about?
Yeah, so
It's
it's
not
been
this one. It's
yeah,
this
it's
one.
been alternating back and forth.
Hmm.
Sometimes I do it with the Queen Amidala
Right.
as her representation.
Hmm.
Every other year it switches between that and more of a sculptural element.
Right.
This year it was like this fairy.
Talk
In
about
years
her.
past, it's been like Mother Mary.
Use the word her. Talk about her and who her is and why you're doing this.
My friend Stephanie, she lived across the street from me when I was growing up here. I moved here. So I moved here in '93 when I was 10.
Where is here?
From What?
Where is here?
Oh, Woodstock, Georgia.
Got
From Canton, Ohio, North Canton. When I was born there. I was born in Hartville, Ohio, actually, in like Amish country. And actually, a couple of friends of mine down here, the kids that I started doing resin pieces with, they had a band, and I was doing kind of like what the Sucklord was doing with Toilers of Chinatown, where he was making figures for the movies and stuff. And they had a little music movie, and I was making figures for it, and that's how I kind of got my start. And they were born in the same little small town, and I met them down here in 8th grade. We had the same music class, and that's where I kind of got my start with all my creativity and being more of an open spirit as far as that goes. Art class, doing special after school activities and stuff like that. But yeah, I moved here when I was 10. My parents got divorced. I grew up military. My dad was a colonel in the Army. He went to West Point. He was born in Hawaii. My mom was born in the Panama Canal Zone. He met her down there while he was a spy. So like working for the government kind of deal.
Wow.
And so they moved up to Ohio and had my sister and I back in the 80s. And yeah, when they got divorced, we moved down here, and I met, my neighbor across the street, Stephanie. She was like 5 years younger than me or something. We grew up with each other or whatever. Her older brother, Brian, was like a year younger than me. It kind of just, after high school, it kind of just deteriorated her situation. She got into drugs and nonsense and stuff, and I don't know, one thing led to another, and she passed away when she was 20. And I was in a band at the time. I was in art school at the time. We were learning about the Renaissance movement and what it really means to be an artist, and you're representing your time and the place and the just the spirit of the world as it stands. And I really took it to heart, and I decided, that's what I wanted to do. That's where I wanted to go, or how I wanted to approach the rest of my life was, go for broke,
Sure. And so this figure, if I'm not mistaken, you said was the 7th year. So every year you've done a tribute to her, right?
Not every year.
Not
I
every
didn't
year.
start doing the tributes until I started doing the resin.
I
She
see.
passed away in 2008 while I was in art school.
Got it.
So
Okay, but in any event, I think you said this is the 7th tribute figure.
So every year I've done something for her. The first year it wasn't me, a direct figure. It was actually a copy of a little Radiohead kind of sculpt that she had done back in art school, or back in art class in high school. And I made it back in the pre-pressure tank days, and it was all nasty, and it was used more or less as a dump mold. And so one day I was like, I need to do something with this and make something out of it. And so I made like a little tribute piece to her, and it fell on the anniversary of when she passed away, which is actually Memorial Day. And that was the last time I saw her. And that night, I saw her go leave the neighbor, whatever, because I can look out the window and stuff. I see people coming out, and, that was pretty much it. Like after it happened, I was in the band, and we were going for broke or whatever. And after school, that kind of deteriorated, and then my fine art stuff kind of strayed away from the fine art ceramics kind of stuff and led to this somehow. And yeah, I started when they gave me the advice to really seek out my voice. I started to do these pieces, and that was actually the original Search for Something More piece, was that first Stephanie Lee Taylor piece.
Right.
I got one up on the wall. But yeah, it's been kind of a thing every year for me to touch base and really look deep and see what comes out. Like I could sit here and explain this to you, what it really means from me as an artist perspective, like for her. But I shouldn't have to from an artistic standpoint.
Sure.
I'm not trying to prove myself, but
I think
for me
the work does stand on its own. I mean, obviously, like we always have this conversation around here about how much you should explain art. Like giving art context and giving a backstory and even just liking an artist sometimes can help you like the work, right? I mean, there's humans are just not that. If you change the color of green on a 7-Up can and you put it in front of 100 people, most humans think that the flavor is different. Like we're just not that good with subjective reality. Like it. So we like a good story, and we like to know stuff. And once we know stuff, and we identify, and we're locked in, I think that's part of, if you want to call the Suck Lord successful, is the persona, which he says that it's not a persona, that it is an extension of who he is. I see it turn on and off, so I kind of view it as a persona, but he says that that's just him, and it could be an exaggerated version of him. So I think it's good for every artist to have, to have that story, and to have, in addition to the voice of their work, to create a story that is likable and that people can identify with. I think the story is what people remember. Now, it could be the opposite. Like we all have, bands that we like where, we would never want to meet the person in the band, like that we're afraid of them. And that's a selling point too. Like, it's like, I mean, the first time I met Frank Kozak, I asked him to sign my book, and he just looked at me like, I don't know, I was 18, and I thought like he was going to jump across the table and kill me. Like, and it's funny, like as we became friends years later, like I'd have my booth next to him at San Diego, and people would say, "Hey, can you ask Frank to sign this for me?" I'm like, why don't you just do it? He's Teddy Bear. He's a really nice guy. He's like, no, dude, that guy is like, and so he just, not necessarily on purpose, but he just gives off this whatever it is. And so, people either gravitate towards that or not. So, I mean, I think the story is always good, and creating, a narrative is good for artists. And I mean, you're certainly doing that for yourself. So what's the end game? Like, you want to do this? Is this you? This is your style? You're going to do this for the rest of your life?
I don't know. I mean, I'm limiting myself to the smaller pressure tank. I've thought about getting the bigger one. You know, I can
What
make.
happens?
I mean, it's just more money.
Right.
That's the only thing. I'm already putting enough money making big pieces in the smaller tanks. How am I going to put more money into making bigger pieces in the big tanks? Or maybe
Right.
not how, but why? Or what's the end game in that, rather than selling the smaller pieces to the resin crowd. I don't think I'll be able to make it an even bigger piece and try to sell it to the same crowd.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There's, people were talking about before your interview about who's going to be the, I was talking about how this whole scene is kind of in its infancy, and who are going to be the people that are going to, pop out of here and have gallery careers and be known. And either this will be just part of their infancy, and they moved on to something else, and some of them will just excel at this. It's hard to say. I think, I always think that if you're having a good time, and if you're expressing yourself, and you're being true to yourself, um, I don't know. Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's that Stephanie piece. Like I'm alive. Like it's go for broke from 2008 on. Like
Right.
as
You
long
have
as things are ticking, I'm moving, and the legs are walking one foot in front of the other, and the brain is still there. I'm still sane. I'm not getting in trouble. I'm not doing stupid stuff. I'm not, being an idiot.
I'm not sure if that's like the lowest standard or the highest.
That's the thing. I mean, that's the thing about it, is like a lot of people look at life like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that before I die, bucket list this, but for me, it's the Sublime song. You might get run over, you might get shot. You never know what's going to happen out there. I mean, look at what's going on this year.
That's some pretty gangster shit, dude.
I mean,
all I
that's
have to
I grew
say.
up with that. Like I grew up with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Biggie and the Tupac and the Nirvana in the '90s, and you
right.
know, that was my adolescence too. You know, I kind of saw things evolve as they are now, and I'm lucky to be one of those kids that grew up in the '80s. You know, to me, I was called Gen Y. I never heard the term millennial. You
Hmm.
know, I was like, what the heck is a millennial? After
Hmm.
me, they were saying Gen Z, and then all of a sudden I heard millennial, and then they start calling me a millennial, lodging me in some group like I'm some, 20-year-old. I don't know nothing. Grew up with the internet. I know what a rotary phone is.
Oh, wow.
I'm not
Yeah,
that old, but I'm old enough.
right.
And
Well,
and people say I look young for my age, so I guess I had that going for myself. That's another one of those correlations I was talking about with me and the Suck Lord.
right.
And we're the same height. I lived with my mom till I was 36.
Yeah,
There's a lot of them. You know, I'm just
sure.
trying to treat it like that. That's why I was saying those things in the documentary. It was almost like I don't know. I mean, they didn't really cover a lot of them in the Mastercasters, but in the interview, I talked a lot, even at the panel when we showed it at 5 Points. When
Hmm.
I had my chance to say something, I said something along the lines of, it's about the Suck Lord. Like when people hear about the resin designer toy art movement, one day in the future, Suck
Hmm.
Lord's name's going to be like one of the first ones, if not, it should be the first one that pops up.
Sure.
And even back in the jerk bag days, I remember on the forums, people would talk about, oh, somebody could take this, and run with it and go into the fine art galleries and doing all that. And I don't know, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't happen. Maybe this will become something, maybe it won't. It doesn't
Sure.
really matter. We're just candles in the wind. We're just, sand falling around in the sands of time. These are the days of our lives.
Sure. I
We're
mean, yes, in that respect, like all of our lives are just very insignificant with, respect to, how vast the universe is, and probably doesn't affect much at all, but it still means everything to you personally. So,
right.
um, and I mean, you can see that in your work, like, how,
Yeah.
to this day, you're still doing tributes to, someone who died quite a long time ago. Most of us would not, you know, keep going back to that. Humans, I think we kind of run away, we compartmentalize and kind of put away and just like, that's painful. And we say we're over that, or I have closure, or, something like that. And then just move on. So do you do your art full time? Do you do
No,
anything?
I have a full-time job and then I do this full-time, I guess you could say. So 40 hours here, 40 hours there, or just
And
shy of or whatever.
got it. And then how is that balancing, working the day job? Is it a creative job? Is it some,
Yeah, I
is
mean,
it,
I make sandwiches.
yeah. That's a creative
Every
job.
single thing is unique that comes through the line.
Yeah.
If you want to put it like that.
But
It's all the
I guess
same, but it's all different.
what I'm trying to get to is that it's not, when you do that job for 40 hours a week, you're not zapping your energy for being creative when you get home. Like, are you
Right.
still able to put in your shift and then you come home and you're able to create?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I split my time up to where I come home and then I take a break for a second and then I work, the rest of the night and
Mhm.
get up and on my days off, as you would say, my normal job, I work 8 or 10 hours, on my stuff and it adds up. Sometimes more, sometimes less, you know.
Right.
I've been doing it for a while. I mean, the idea when I started all this in 2014, when I went, balls to the wall, one piece a month.
Mhm.
The goal was to go 3 or 4 years and just see where it led because I had seen guys like Killer and Two Bit, come up by doing that for about that long. And I was like, they seem like they're like the top people in the scene, besides
Mhm.
Sucklord, obviously, who's been doing it for a while.
Right.
And so that was the goal, and I did it. And at the end of it, the scene had grown so much, and it was obvious that I was on the right path, and all that. So,
Right.
yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, well, we often talk about, I would say that I can only count maybe on one hand how many artists in the scene actually are able to cobble together a living only through art. It's it's the exception, not the rule. And then we've talked to a lot of people about the pros and cons about having a creative job, um, versus something that they would consider not as creative, and their ability. Because I have a feeling like if you were doing work for somebody else doing the same thing, you wouldn't necessarily come home and have that energy like after a full day shift to then start doing that same thing for yourself.
Yeah.
um it's kind of like the story about like the musician who, if you're a session musician playing other people's music all day, like do you come home and start writing your own music, and do you want to be in a band, or do you want to just grab a beer and sit on the couch and get away from it? Whereas if you are making sandwiches, it sounds to me like when you get home you're motivated to start working and creating. um, yeah, I like the story that this is a woman who lives down the street from me, and uh, I inadvertently met her because she was a producer on a TV show and had hired me to appraise some toy collections for some intervention collector show. And I'd have to go to these people's houses and look at their collections and then submit a appraisal to the, to the producers and the hosts. So they seemed like they knew what they were talking about. And that job was like so stressful for her that she got into like soap making, and she would just make this artisanal soap. And she just described that to me and my wife as like, this is the only thing I have. Like I do this other job like 70, 80 hours a week, whatever I go, it's high stress, these producers are crazy, there's deadlines and this. And then like that's the only thing she has. Like she got her dog and she got her soap. It's like, look, I made this soap, and then she just gives it to you. It's like, here, I made some soap, it has whatever lilies and raisins in it, I don't know, whatever it is. What I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, well,
Nah, I mean, I've worked this job for going on 20 years now.
yeah.
And I mean, I was a wrestler coming out of high school. I did basically like amateur style professional wrestling. I was a musician. I was in a couple of bands going into art school, right before art school, and then during art school. My second band, we recorded an album at one of the top studios, Studio A, quality, um, all sorts of stuff. Like we had shit going. Sorry, excuse
Right.
my language for any kids watching. Um,
Damn kids.
we had our thing together, and
Yeah.
I've been on a lot of endeavors like that where it was pretty obvious that I was rising to the top of whatever was going on. And when I got to the resin scene, I was like, all right, I need to prove my worth.
Right.
Something needs to happen here. I was president of the ceramics club and had to do all that, ceramics things and take trips to these conventions out and far
Right.
off lands and, running the show. As far as the wrestling thing came from a thing we started in my basement that turned into a guy's ring that he got for Christmas, is like a little training ring from his dad in his backyard. And then that turned into a thing where a guy wanted to promote us with some professionals. So we weren't trained, but we were working with trained professionals, in venues in downtown Atlanta.
Wow.
Like it got pretty serious. So I mean, it seems like whatever I get my hands on, not to try to blow smoke my ass.
No, look, I think you've done it. You've made a name for yourself. Everyone in the scene knows who you are, and when it comes to like respect and admiration, like you have that from all of your peers. So I don't know if that's considered making it, but that's you know better than a what's that saying? Like a hot poke in the ass, or how does that go? I don't know.
Yeah.
What? I don't know. Mixed metaphors. Sorry.
No,
Anyway.
I mean, honestly, if you want to hear my making it story.
Oh, sure. Oh, now we're getting to it. Okay, let's go. The making it story.
So, the 4-year plan, at the end of it, the last piece I put out, I was nominated for the Designer Toy Best Resin Award. It's only like me, Wilkowski, and Rika, and Rich Page or something that had ever been up for Best Resin, that it was as completely self-produced, one unique, one of a kind ideas and execution. I ran into Ric Flair at the airport on that trip or something like that, or the year before or something. Like, coming from my wrestling background, and that day I was supposed to go hang out with Healy. Like, I was.
That's the day you met Ric Flair. Okay.
Yeah, like I hit the weather was bad. That's what it was, and it was the first 5 Points Fest. I was up there, and Healy walks by my booth with Simeon. And I was like, oh, Healy, because I met him at the first In Action thing I went to. And so we talked for a minute, and I was like, oh, can I come by your studio, whatnot? He's like, yeah, sure. And that Monday, the weather was bad. And so I texted him, was like, sorry, I can't come through. I'm going to go ahead and get to the airport. So I was at the airport, and lo and behold, Ric Flair, of all people, walked by. And for me, coming from the wrestling background, I'm like, whoa. And then from Healy, with the wrestling stuff that he does, it was just kind of like, I text Healy, I was like, dude, you won't believe who I ran. So, but the making it part.
Just to be clear, so you're saying that like that was like a highlight of your life, is like meeting Ric Flair at the airport. I'm
saying that the 3 to 4 year plan or whatever, making it as an artist, being on this path, and doing these things, little things like that. Doing work for Vinny of Less Than Jake. I was a huge fan of theirs when I was a teenager growing up. Like, they were one of the bands that influenced me with punk rock and all that. Some of my early collecting things was collecting their records and memorabilia and stuff. So, him coming to me and being like, hey, can you do some work? And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm also a huge fan. So it kind of went hand in hand, like things coming full circle like that. So that coming full circle, the wrestling thing coming full circle.
Right.
Little things like that. But the making it story it was all over. The 4 year plan was over. I had no more plans of going up there, no more plans of doing any more trips or anything like that, and going out of my way. But basically, the 4 year plan also involved dumping as much money as I could into it and not worrying about the repercussions, credit cards.
Right.
And so I didn't have any plan of going up there, and all of a sudden, Bo of Black Drove and J Corp invited me to stay at their place. They had just opened that gallery that they had for a little bit there at the beginning of the year, and they were going to get me to do a show. And he wanted me to stay with them for the weekend and kind of, wine and dine and show me kind of what was going on, and show me the opportunity and start the discussion. And that was, he was like, when can you come up? And I was like, well, In Action Figures is coming up. Maybe I can just do that, and we can, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I can make the show like I usually do, or whatever, like I did the last couple of years, or did last year. Even though I have no plans of going up there, it was my way of still, getting into the scene without, going too far out of the way of the 4 year plan. But it was also an opportunity. Like, he was offering me an opportunity for a solo art show in Brooklyn, New York. Like, for me, that was it. I mean, that was making it for me, But I mean, it never happened. Some stuff happened with the gallery. No big deal. We weren't in any rush to do it anyway. So by the time I was kind of getting ready to start doing something, it wasn't even kind of a thing. But anyway, besides all that, at the show In Action Figures, I see a guy looking at my piece, and it was lower, so you had to kind of like hunch over and look at it. And somebody looking at my work, like honestly looking at it, which at the gallery show, you have all these blister packs, everybody's there to see all that stuff. Of course, I see some people every once in a while looking at my stuff, but I see this guy looking at it honestly. I walk up to him and I talk to him. It's great conversation. He's an artist too. He shows me some stuff on his phone that he was thinking about making. That's like a 3D kind of thing. And gives me like this little card thing and all that. And I was like, cool. Like I had a really great conversation with this person. And then right afterwards, one of my buddies is like, dude, you know who you just met? And I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, that was Alex Gray. He does all the work for like tools. I'm like, oh shit, really? You know, I think I don't never really been like a really big tool fan. But you know, when I went to bed that night and woke up the next morning, it got me thinking, like, have I ever known like a work by that guy? And so when I woke up and I looked up his stuff, I was like, oh shit, he did the cover for In Utero, Nirvana's third album. And
Sure, but he's
they
also
were fans of his, and
he also did those books and those calendars every year with all of the crazy like mandalas with the veins and the like.
yeah.
Like I saw that
Oh
dude's
yeah,
work.
that was where
grow
I
up.
began. I started looking in my anatomy books because I had some, and I was like, dude, did he do one of those weird ones that I have? But no, then I found that, and I was like, wow, like I've had that in my collection since I was in like 6th grade. You know, of course he's done something that I know. You know, and the kind of capstone on it was I sent him a thank you letter.
Mhm.
You know, and he started following me on Instagram. You know, he gave me the time of day.
Right.
You know, of the leader of the visionary art movement, which is essentially what the search for something more was in the first place. When they
Right.
said, "What's your voice, Derrick?" I said, "Oh, well, my voice has nothing to do with any of this pop culture stuff. I'm done making He-Man and Potato Head, and Ninja Turtles, and Star Wars. You know, all the licenses that I used that first year, like I threw all that out the window.
Mm.
You know, everything went completely ambiguous. You know, because that's what it was. Like
But
that's my voice.
but
You
that
know."
works. That works because it's enough reference to keep you in this scene and for people to identify it, but then like I've been saying before, it's transformed into something else. When you show the original, the parts are evident, to anyone, like what you've pulled them from, but after you're done casting it and painting it, like it is it becomes unrecognizable as a pop culture reference for the most part, and just the seamless ways that you've combined them. Anyway, it's great work, dude. And for those of you who are out there, there's still a couple of these left. I believe these are sold, but there's still one or two of these. And this little guy right here. And look, man, we look forward to more Derrick Lauglaug pieces in our future.
Thanks.
Really, thank you for taking the time.
I appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. We will be in touch soon.
Yeah, thanks, though.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Take care, dude.
See ya.
Amazing.